All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, we're doing a preview and prediction for Week 6 contest in the Big 12 between Iowa State and Cincinnati down in Nippert Stadium. Iowa State 2.5-point favorites, 54.5 is the total. Noon Eastern time on ESPN2. Getting things started with this Iowa State offense going against the Bearcat defense for Iowa State. This offense this year putting up over 31 points per game. This is a group that has been pretty darn respectable. Rocco Beck, that quarterback, this guy is a great leader with his ability to make plays through the air. And of course, as a runner, 5 touchdowns on the ground, another 7 through the air of 2 picks. Despite working with what's typically going to be a lesser talented receiving group, over the last 3 years, he had the benefit of having 2 NFL players now, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins. Those guys are gone, so this team has had to make way of what they got with this lesser group, and it's been respectable for them. Brett Eskildsen has been the leading target, 216 yards. Chase Sewell, 178. He's starting to come around. Xavier Townsend's got 141 yards. They've really been spreading out to a handful of different guys. Dominic Overby has 2 touchdowns as well as a freshman. It's really going to be about these tight ends, though. Benjamin Brahmer and Gabe Burkle leading the charge. They both have a combined 28 touchdowns for nearly 300 yards and 4 touchdowns between the group. It's been a very respectable part of this football team, which I knew coming into the year this was going to be a big focal point for this offense, especially in the red zone, especially with their ability to be blockers as well. You're going to see a lot of 12 and 22 personnel out of Iowa State because this is an offense that's going to want to get under center and pound the football. Carson Hansen, a very physical running back, 220 pounds, leads the charge. Abu Sama's more of the change of pace guy of his versatility and speed. Despite being 210 pounds, he does have some nice athletic ability. 151 yards running per game for Iowa State. And it's really not all that ideal. They didn't do great this past Saturday against Arizona, against Arkansas State on the road a couple weeks ago. That was a game where they only ended up winning by 1 score. They're really struggling to find great production on the ground. Against South Dakota, they had 200-plus yards. Iowa held them to only 104. So, the rushing total is not great. This is a team that wants to stay ahead of the sticks to set up these short third down opportunities where they can utilize their tight ends, utilize their power run game, implement Beck's legs as well in the read option. So this is where Iowa State lives, is really in those third and shorts. This offense has been really kind of hanging on by a thread, it seems like, and I know they did a pretty good job against Arizona of producing. That was mainly through the air. The run game, and despite their qualities, has just not been all that perfect for them, and I think that is a big problem for the Cyclones, who are going to continue to try and march forward as they now face their first road test of the year for an offense that is 50% on third down. Beck is great. He can make things happen with his legs on those third and longs that they're probably going to be in more so often in this game. Going up against the Cincinnati defense, it's going to be getting back their top player, Dante Corleone, it appears, at defensive tackle, coming off a brutal game from its defense against Kansas where they gave up over 10 yards per play, most of that through the air, 445 yards passing, including a 93-yarder to get the game started. They still won that game, though. It was a shootout on offense. Their defense was down a couple of scores early, and they were able to create some stops. So despite giving up basically 600 yards and almost 11 yards per play, this is a defense that was able to man up when it needed to. And back in week 1 against Nebraska, I thought they played very well against the run, even though they're starting to kind of get grinded down on. Dante Corleone is a phenomenal playmaker in the middle. This is an Iowa State offensive line. I think it's playing well, but they're not great. They have allowed a good amount of sacks this year. Dylan Barrett at left guard, Jim Bonifacius at center, and then right guard Brendan Black, who's just not really good in pass protection. It's a veteran group, but they still have their inconsistencies. Even at tackle, Tyler Miller and James Neal have been a little less than desirable when it comes to pass protection. So I think for Iowa State, it's going to be hard for them to manufacture offense because I think this run defense for Cincinnati is going to be good with Corleone coming back. Jalen Hunt has been a nice leader for them in his absence. Isaiah Rogers, Makai Coleman. Most importantly, though, I think the linebacker group for Cincinnati is one of the more underrated groups in the country. I think that this is a group that doesn't get enough love, led by Jack Golday. He's their top tackler, 36 stops by far and away, the top in that area. Jonathan Thompson right next to him. Simeon Coleman, that is, and then Brian Sims. These guys have all been getting on the field and been playing great. Coming into the year, I felt like this was a pretty deep group for the Bearcats, and they've been playing very well. And I think it's the focal point for their defense as well. It's going to be tough when it comes to defending these tight ends, certainly. And I think the run game is going to bring a lot of physicality to the table. And I think Cincinnati's built for it on the middle of their defense in this secondary. they're a lot better than what they played last week. I think Matthew McDoom, their top corner, is a much better player than giving up almost 500 yards through the air. Obviously, it wasn't just him, of course, but he's a lead corner that can make plays for them. Christian Harrison's a veteran slot. G. Quan Sanks, Antoine Peak Jr. I mean, these are good safeties. They've really been shining against the run, though. They've been elite in that regard. Coverage has been a little bit more inconsistent from those guys. And Trevon Gola Collard has been a new starter for this defense who's been playing very well for them. So these safeties have great ability to get into the box and make plays against the run. And I think if you can do that against Iowa State, you have a pretty good shot of beating them. But you got to be aware of them when it comes to those 3rd and 5s of defending those tight ends on, quick curls, out routes, putting them on one-on-one opportunities with all that size could certainly be beneficial for Iowa State. And for Cincinnati, this isn't a pass rush that's exactly dynamic by any means. They do have 10 sacks on the year, but it's really the linebackers coming downhill, and they only had 1 against Kansas. Able to find a couple against Nebraska, and they're able to run up the numbers against the weaker opponents. But I think this is a defense that's probably going to be in for a pretty good day, returning home after what was an awful effort, but they still got the job done after all. Moving to the other side of things, the Cincinnati offense going up against that Cyclone defense. They're led by a quarterback that also has similar capabilities as Rocco Becht and Brendan Sorsby. I was a big fan of this guy at Indiana back in 23. I felt like he was a great transfer addition last year for Cincy. Now he's a veteran starter at this point. He's off to a great start. 69% comp rate, over 1,200 total yards. He's got 14 touchdowns. He's really good with his rushing ability as well, especially against man coverage. And this is a group that has some pretty poor tackles, I think, for Cincinnati. The offensive lineman for them, it's been a good old line, but Joe Cotton at left tackle and then the right tackle and DeAndre Buford are coming off pretty sluggish efforts against the Jayhawks. So this is a team in Iowa State that doesn't exactly have a great pass rush, but I still think with how weak these tackles have been, you could have some opportunities. And I think rush lane integrity is going to be massive in this game, because if those tackles are getting beat wide, Sorsby's just going to take off and split the gaps. And he's really going to beat them when they're playing man coverage. Tamoda McDonough has been their top pass rusher so far. I love Dom Orge on the interior. Those are really your best guys on the D-line. That's really not all that good. Ikena Izogu, he's been respectable this year, 285-pounder. That's been in the program for a couple of years developing. So the defensive line I don't think is all that good for Iowa State. The run defense has drastically improved, and I think they've proven that by some of the teams they've faced. Iowa has a very good offensive line. They held them in check for the most part. Kansas State, turns out their rushing attack isn't all that good without Edwards, so maybe not the greatest measure of success. But last year, the run defense was so bad for Iowa State, and so far they have improved. The most they've given up was 160 to Arkansas State. And it's really because these linebackers are playing much better football. This is by far, I think, their best test. Their biggest test, that is, when it comes to showing if they've really improved. Cooper Ebel at linebacker. Caleb Bacon, who's really going to be your standout. Caleb Brazina and Bayou Goodwin. Those are going to be the main guys to get on field. Ebel, he's still been an inefficient tackler, though. 8 missed tackles. That's leading the team. Bacon has been far more consistent. Neither of the backers have really been all that good when it comes to coverage, and they have a tight end themselves in Joey Royer, who can really exploits you at all levels of the field. This guy is a beast, one of the best tight ends in the country, 162 yards and 2 scores on the year. You look at some of the other receivers that are really stepping up. Cyrus Allen, this guy is a demon out of the slot. He's been good his entire career. Coming off a phenomenal game against Kansas. 11 grabs, 128, 2 scores, all season highs. Caleb Goody as well, the Colorado State transfer, was emerging with some big plays. He's got back-to-back games at 90-plus yards now. So now you're starting to establish a nice little trio at pass catcher. And then Jeff Caldwell has been pretty respectable himself, getting a couple of receptions per game. So the Cincinnati passing attack is really starting to ascend. They are going up against one of the better secondaries in the nation. Marcus Neal, he plays a lot of box safety, but he's been elite against the run. He's been doing things in coverage as well. You look at who they have at corner, and Jontez Williams and Jeremiah Cooper, one of the top duos in FBS, especially Williams this year, has not cracked much when it comes to making plays out wide. Jamison Patton, he's been great as well in the slot. I mean, this is just such a good secondary top to bottom. Tashawn James, I think, is a really good playmaker against the run as well. So this is an Iowa State defense that's really predicated on its secondary really doing a lot of the damage for them when it comes to making plays against the run, and then, doing well when it comes to covering those zones in the 4-2-5. And I think for Cincinnati, this is a team that's really showed good balance over the last 2 years now. The rushing attack has got 3 games, 200-plus yards. They struggled bad against Bowling Green back in week 2, but everyone else they've really been picking apart. The addition of Tyree Walker to put next to Sorsby has really been good for them. 224 yards and 3 scores. He's a guy that can really make you pay in the hole at 218 pounds. And then Evan Pryor, he's their RB2, gets a handful of touches, and he's really explosive. 90 yards on 6 carries against Kansas, for example. This is a guy who does that. He's a home run hitter. He can rip off a big run every now and then, and that's certainly a problem for opposing defenses. The biggest problem for me when it comes to Cincinnati teams is just the offensive line. Again, I talked about those tackles. I think they're pretty weak. I think the interior is a much better group. Gavin Gerhardt at center is probably going to be your standout. Teron Tayo at right guard, though, has been a pleasant surprise in pass protection. So I don't think this is the worst offensive line in the world. I don't think Iowa State can exactly expose it. But if those tackles are going to play as bad as they did against Kansas, that could certainly be a problem. But I think, again, rush lane integrity is going to be massive for Iowa State because Sorsby is so killer with his legs, especially when those DBs got their backs turned in coverage. And if we got routes developing downfield, he's going to take off and he will pick up those first downs, pretty much guaranteed. So the Bearcats offense, I like the matchup they have on Saturday. Leads us to the final analysis and prediction. I'm going to take them to get the upset. Only 2.5-point underdogs here at home for Iowa State. This is a team that's kind of just skating by. They were only like 4-point favorites for some reason against Arizona. I really don't know why. I don't think that made a lot of sense. But they've played some close games. I mean, pretty much all year long. Iowa, that's expected, right? Against Arkansas State, that was a little unimpressive there. And this is a team that's already played 5 games. Started the year in Dublin. I know they got a bye week a couple weeks ago, but it seems like their gas tank might be running maybe potentially a little bit low, as they're not going to take their first road trip in conference, and it's going to be at Cincinnati, a very good Bearcat team as well that has an offense. Their defense, even though they got gashed last week, they do have components that can make things tricky for Iowa State. They're not nearly as explosive, especially at pass catcher, as Kansas was. So I think you're going to see a bounce-back performance from this secondary. Covering those tight ends is certainly going to be a challenge. But Iowa State, their run game is not overwhelming by any means. Rocco Becht, he's as good as you want to be when it comes to trying to run this scheme with the limited talent around him. But I just think it's going to be hard for them to run the ball consistently now that Dante Corleone is going to be back, and Beck's going to have to make plays, and he certainly can. But I think Sorsby's just going to make more of them as he has similar attributes, and I think he's honestly probably a better quarterback, quite frankly. So I think Cincinnati's going to get the job done here. This is a very scrappy team. Even if they're down in games, they look to get things done. So I think this is a team that is going to do some damage here, and they're going to get the upset, and they're going to shake things up in the Big 12. 27-21, Cincinnati money line's my best bet for Saturday's Big 12 game. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.